today, our main event. I'm really excited to be hosting a call today. I've been in the background for a bit, but today I have the pleasure of welcoming three of my colleagues for a conversation about applying to research roles in industry specifically. And so I'm pleased to welcome today Amit, who is a research scientist with Cohere for AI, and who has a PhD from the Center for Language and Cognition at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. I'm sure I did not quite pronounce that correctly, but congrats, Ahmed, on your PhD. We also have Laura, who's a research intern at Cohere and a PhD candidate at the University College London, and Kate, who's a staff talent partner at Cohere and has managed the recruiting and hiring for many of our research roles, so brings a really unique perspective and key perspective to getting in the door in industry. And that's me. I'm Madeline. I'm our operations lead at Cohere for AI. Okay, enough of that. Let's get to it. Let me take down my slides. Here we are. Well, okay. Hi, Kate. Hi, Laura. Hi, Amit. So glad you could join me today for this chat. I think to kick this off, we're going to start with a personal question. Why did you all choose to work in industry? Amit, maybe you can start us off on this one.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Also, thanks, Madeline, for inviting me. It's very exciting discussing my reasons and also in general why in that difference between industry research and academic research in general. So why I kind of pick doing research in industry. I think one thing is experience. I had some internship experiences that I kind of also tried. I did my PhD, but also throughout my PhD, I did some internships, and I see how things working in industry research as well. That was one of the reasons that but in my experience, I really liked working in industry as a researcher. This is one thing. Also, like when things considered in our field, state of the ML in general, the scale, the compute is, I mean, these are really important. And I felt like doing research in industry, I'm not sure this is not necessarily a positive thing, to be honest. But this is how it is at the moment. And doing research in industry gives you such kind of maybe advantage, if I may say. That is another reason. I mean, scale of the research that I want to do very briefly. I don't want to keep it long, but also the environment that allows me to do this scale of projects. I think this combination is the most fundamental thing that's from my side.
Laura, do you have a similar take, or what's your point of view here?
Definitely, that's a big part of it for me as well. I think what I can add that's different from Amit's answer is that when I was doing my PhD, before I joined Cohere, actually, there weren't really any open source models that had similar capabilities as, GPT-4 or at the time GPT 3.5 that were out there. And I didn't know how they were trained that well. I didn't know what kind of data they were trained on. So I was evaluating these models in my PhD and trying to say something interesting about them without really knowing how they work. And so that's a big other aspect for me to come to Cohere, but also there's many great people at Cohere. They did a great job hiring. So I was very excited to work with my current manager also because I admire his work and his thinking.
Yeah, I appreciate that take that sometimes it may have less to do with industry or academia, but who do you want to work with, and following where those people are and who you think can best help you on your journey is a interesting way forward. Okay, I appreciate that you gave some kudos there to the hiring team at Cohere. Kate, let's pass it off to you. In that case, what do you think are the most important skills and qualifications that you look for when hiring for ML research roles?
That's a great question. So right off the top, we will look for engineering skills, and we look for those skills through contributions to open source projects, portfolios, or previous experience. Diversity of experience is also viewed as a strength. So having worked across different topics with various collaborators or even across different roles. And then I would say communication is the main thread that really makes certain people shine throughout the interview process. And the main building blocks in the interviews are things like being able to narrate your past experience in a succinct way, but also accessible way and context-rich way. I saw a message from Franz pop up. Do you actually look at people's Twitter profiles? I do, absolutely. Also, things like communication throughout the technical interviews, like being able to explain your decision-making while you're coding or throughout system design, or when you're explaining complex topics is extremely important. And also describing your motivation about what you are looking for next, what you're looking to gain through your next experience, and so on.
Okay, can we jump off of Franz's spicy question here? Do you actually look at people's Twitter? What do you look for? Is it number of followers, or what kinds of things stand out here?
Oh, no, not number of followers. I mean, I'm always like, I'm a person who like has had a Twitter account with like 4 followers for the longest time. So like zero judgment towards other low-key profiles out there. I respect it. It's more of like, I love seeing what people post. Like, I wouldn't say that it's something that I've seen something on a Twitter profile and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. This is like deterring this person from moving forward. It's strictly a curiosity and getting to build a better understanding of another person.
Yeah, it seems like it ties in well to this piece you were saying about communication skills and being able to narrate past experiences. More and more, I'm seeing people summarize their research, either their research or other people's research, on Twitter and in Twitter threads. And I'm always impressed when I see that on other people's profiles. And I think it sounds like it could be a way to stand out in a recruiter's eyes as well. Laura and Amit, do you have any tips for this piece that Kate has raised about communication skills, being able to narrate your past experience or explain complex topics? How do you approach things like this? Yeah, go for it, Amit.
Usually, like just on the point, I wanted to say about this Twitter because it's a really nice question. And when I was applying, I was also thinking like, how should I use Twitter? I mean, it doesn't matter. But I think Twitter or any other medium is more like, for example, before interview someone, I look at their like Google Scholar page or Twitter or their website, right? This is more or less like what kind of research this person does. Actually, Twitter is one of the medium. These days, maybe one of the most important medium, because when you do research, if you think it's impactful, you can actually really kind of highlight this impact on Twitter, which also allows you to get some feedback or get some interaction, even build a network to do some collaboration. That's why I think this is important. It's not about like really some other thing, just like what Kate said. In that sense, this is very, very, I think, important to mention. Yeah, go ahead, Laura, if you have more to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool actually to hear from Kate that these things are important, because that's what I've been thinking and doing myself. Actually, I found my PhD through Twitter, which is funny. Literally like through Twitter DMs. But yeah, I do try to spend some time on communicating my research on Twitter, actually. Like, I think once you finish your papers and you upload them to archive and you go to conferences and stuff, it's also important to write a blog post, a nice blog post, and advertise that on Twitter. And I think that can really open new doors. And even if you didn't have a paper or something, but if there was some interesting engineering challenge you had in one of your projects, like the process of writing a blog post about that and putting that on Twitter can be super rewarding. You have to think about what you're writing down in a different way, so you learn stuff yourself as well. And people pick it up. Like, one of my blog posts was picked up by a relatively well-known YouTuber, who the channel I forgot at this point, but that was really cool. And yeah, so I think like communicating your research is really part of it these days.
I think it's worth noting that it's not the be all and end all is the other part of these things. Some of our most senior researchers do not have a Twitter profile at all. But I think one thing I'm picking up on here is it's one way in, and if it's an authentic way of communicating for you and who you are and what you're working on, then it sounds like what Kate's getting at is the recruiting team is just trying to get a sense of who you are, what matters to you, and how you communicate that. Is that on point, Kate?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know this is we're jumping into some topics that we have coming up down the line, but I wanted to call out how much I love personal websites, because I think that's that's the one link that I will click on 100 times out of 100. Like, it's such a great way to show how dynamic you are. And then Anthony's question about including open source projects, that's a really easy way to collate your links and then have them be really clickable. Sometimes on a resume, unfortunately, like if you click on a link in an ATS on a resume, it actually won't open a new window. So it creates a little bit of a barrier to having a project viewed. And a website is such a wonderful way to capture who you are, what your interests are, previous writing samples via blog post, or links to your paper. And then I love like the truly personal sections, like people who are like, here's my camera roll, obviously selected pictures, like from the past like 10 days, or here's a picture of my cat. Like, all of these things add to feeling like you have like a better idea about who the candidate is.
Yeah, I think one thing that's striking a chord with me in this conversation is that on top of looking for strong research, engineering, and communication skills, people who are reviewing your profiles are thinking, who do I want to talk to every day? Who do I want to share space with, bounce ideas off of? Research can be such a vulnerable pursuit of sharing ideas and experiencing failure together, of consideration of who is it that I want to go through this with and experience these success and failures with. Okay, gentle nods. I feel like I'm hitting on something there too. Okay, cool. Let's transition a little bit and talk about the distinction here between industry and academia, the two main areas in which research roles exist. Today we're focused on the industry side of things, but Laura and Amit, you both have experience in academic environments as well. What have been what are the key differences you've observed in working in industry versus working in academia? We'll start there. Who wants to jump in first?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think like Ahmed already touched up on one big key difference now, which is compute access. And I think that's something that has changed over the last couple of years, and I hope will change again a little bit. But right now, there's just much more compute in industry than in academia, and that means that when you're in academia, for me at least, and I think many other students, you really have to think of what kind of research questions you can answer with the resources you have, and that requires some creativity these days, because depending on what you want to do, often people want to see that your method scales, or we're not working with that small models anymore these days. And that means that in industry, actually, like what I'm doing right now at Cohere, I could not do at my university. And that just means that I can really quite freely ask a research question about LLMs and try to answer it at scale with like lots of compute at my disposal. And I think that's a really key difference that I expect to change over the next couple of years again and balance out a little bit again. And another thing I think is academic freedom, where that's also something that has changed the past couple of years. Like, there was some time where you could really seemingly do very fundamental research in industry, but I think there is often this like hook that needs to be to the company's interest as well. So which is, makes sense and good. Like, academia can do some more obscure stuff here and there, and in industry it it's generally needs to coincide with the company's interests as well.
I think that's a really key point, that although there may be more access to compute, the use of that compute may be more monitored or under tighter control by the company for research directions that are in line with their view. So may give up some of that freedom of exploration for the ability to use those resources. Amit, what's your stance here?
I think actually I like to start with. I mean, there are differences that we are talking here, but maybe the nice starting point is there are no fundamental differences. I think this is also something that we need to say starting, because this is a research, right? So it's not like one is fundamentally different than another. Of course, there are differences, as Laura mentioned. In addition to what Laura said, maybe I can add also, like, a skill set is slightly bit different, in my opinion, when in industrial research and in academic research. In industrial research, due to the scale, sometimes stakes can be higher, right? I think specialization is important, but also being all-arounder, in a sense, being able to execute multiple things at the same time is quite important. I mean, this is a skill that everyone can acquire. It's something not like depends on your background or major or university, but this is something is important to pursue if you are considering academic research. Together with that, like Laura, I think I really like Laura's example in terms of, like, we know, like, even you don't need to do research in industry, you know GPT, all these big models, right? But training such models actually requires a lot of know-how set, and these are not really open, right? This is also part of skill set. When industrial research, these kind of details, like precise, concrete, things that you did in your research project, becomes a bit more important, in my opinion, because the question that you are going to get asked is, like, how did you execute this research idea? It's not only about the idea itself, right? Because you may have a super good research idea, but how? Because now you have a scale, you have a computer. Unfortunately, mostly in industry. I mean, fortunate for industry, but unfortunate for academic. Now, then, of course, you should be able to execute this idea. That's, I think, another kind of aspect between these two.
Yeah, this is a good point. I feel like we had the one session on research ideation, but it feels like now we need to have a session on, okay, great, you've got the idea. Now what? How do you execute on it? What are the next steps? Yeah, great points here. Kate, can you give us some tips on how specifically junior researchers can structure application packages that in a way that highlights their strengths and make them stand out? I think sometimes you must be getting hundreds of applications at a time. Are you looking at all of them, or how do you decide which ones to spend more time with?
Yeah, that's another great question. Because of the volume of applications, reading each resume cover to cover is almost impossible, or is impossible. So my number one tip and advice for junior researchers, but honestly at this point, anyone applying for a role in a highly competitive or voluminous field, is editing down your application to highlighting your strengths as well as possible. Every line or link on your resume or application package has to be paying dividends in your job search. It's prime real estate. So try to steer clear from really generic phrases like about me sections that have phrases like, I work well with a team, but I also work well on my own. It's something that says very little about you. The rule of thumb, I would say, is having 4 sections on your resume that are your education, your experience, projects or publications, and then a skills section. And again, when you're including your skills, really try to focus on things that you are good at. I don't know if any of you have ever seen those lists where you like show how well you know a language, and it's like a bar. And if you're including a bar of like, I know C++ at a 10% capacity, it's probably something to be left off your resume. And then again, highlighting the website aspect. If you have the capacity to invest in something like that, I think it's something that could be really useful for your job search.
Laura and Kate, do you remember how you each prepared for applying either to your current roles or to previous roles? Are there things you focused on?
Laura, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. For my current role, I really thought a lot about the kind of research question I wanted to ask. And yeah, so what I did there is I looked at what my managers, I mean, I knew my manager's work, but I tried to think a little bit about what he was doing and tried to come up with a bunch of different research directions that could be interesting for us, like both us, me and Cohere and my manager, and then really dive deep into that. But more generally, what I do when I try to apply for internships is I basically the only book I've used is Cracking the Coding Interview. I never do lead code, that kind of stuff. And I really try to work on this communication aspect. Like I literally code in a Google Doc. So without highlighting anything like that, and I try to be able to explain every step that I'm doing. Try to find all the edge cases, all these classic things that you do when preparing for a coding interview, and then also really practicing the interviews with other people. There's this website that you can use where other people are also trying to apply, and then you switch. Yeah, those kind of things.
Ahmet, do you have memories from this as well? You're on mute right now.
Yeah, I thought the question was to Kate. That's why I was on mute. In my case, yeah, similar with what Laura said. I think the most important thing that I did was I also really liked the aspect of it was showcasing my research agenda. That is another thing, maybe not different in that case, similar with academia. I think when you do research, having a research agenda, I mean, with concrete and inconcrete points altogether is quite important. And this part was one of my main preparations, I would say. So in there, I thought like, okay, I'm going to do a research in this lab with this group of people, what I want to achieve in the long run. Of course, this should be supported with this like a short-term project, like how should I start, or what do you want to do at the beginning, but also at the end I want to achieve this. I think this is really important, especially for the research in general. Other than that, so this is super generic, but I totally believe this really preparation for coding or like for example fundamental ML. You may be doing PhD in machine learning, right? You probably specialize on multiple areas, but preparation is required. That's, I think, even if like super basic questions. So I think this preparation, just like what Laura said, like I always prepare a presentation, even if I'm not going to present. This helps me to like a kind of make my mind for the interview. That would be one suggestion, I guess.
I love that tip. Yeah, even if you don't necessarily have a presentation, practicing, distilling your research and communicating it succinctly and in an engaging way sounds like a really great way to prepare, because you'll get some questions about this in one form or another. So having points you can go back to can be really helpful. Would you say there's a difference in preparing to apply for a role in industry versus preparing to apply for a role in academia?
Shall I go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think so. This is exactly what I was trying to say in terms of the skill set, because you want to showcase some of the skills that you have, right? And in terms of the industry research, that is slightly bit more important everywhere, but slightly bit more important is that, as I said, like execution. So in the preparation phase, for example, in the presentation, I did this project. This is the main idea, but this is how I did it. Like the code examples or really concrete small details that made you stand out. Like, okay, I trained this model, but there was this, I'm just guessing, like this loss spikes. This is how I solved it. This might be really kind of, okay, yeah, this person really knows what they are doing, right? This is kind of important thing, I guess, in terms of the industry research interviews in general.
Excellent. Laura or Kate, do you have a perspective here on any key differences between applying to industry versus academia, different considerations?
Yeah, shall I go?
Yeah, go
I
for
was
it.
just messaging in the chat and copied
Oh,
my
great.
notes instead of a website, so that's great. And you can read my notes also in the chat now. So yeah, so the question was the difference in applying between academia and yeah, I think there's a massive difference. Like I think it's almost not comparable. Like the jobs I've applied for in academia, they don't really ask for technical skills in the way that industry does. So what they've been doing in academia is often like they share a paper and they ask for you to read it in advance and think critically about it, and then you can discuss that in the interview. And of course, like this research agenda showing that you have your research agenda and that you can think about long-term research questions like really over multiple years. Whereas in industry, it's really about showcasing your technical skills, really like the math behind ML that we're doing. Like you need to be able to effectively communicate about that, understand it, your coding skills, show that you can collaborate with others, like listening to the interviewer and picking up on their cues and those kind of things. So I think the process is really, yeah, quite different.
This ties into a question we've had in the chat. So we've been saying, technical skills, engineering skills. What are these? What are the key things that we're looking for? How is it assessed? What's the deal with these technical skills and engineering skills we've been talking about? Ahmed, will you jump in? You've structured some coding challenges and interviews in your time, I know.
Yes, technical challenges. I mean, there is of course like fundamental ML. Since we are talking about machine learning research, like really fundamental ML, but it's not about like asking question and getting like a first answer. Is not the thing, right? That we are looking for. Of course, it will start with that, but it's then okay. It's what is the behind that? What is behind this answer? Like it's really what, as Laura said, like how you communicate and how you explain the fundamental answer. For example, this is one thing. This is about like a fun ML theory, let's say. And in the second, in terms of before even coding, like what kind of experiment throughout your previous experience that you did, and what scale it was. It's not about you have to have that kind of experience, but it's more about can you do it. I guess this is like it should be like giving some signal in terms of okay, this I can run this experiment in this scale with a number of GPUs, for example, something in that line. And coding, I think coding questions are in the industry applications are quite detailed, and it's a bit more like not exactly at least from my side. It's not. It can start with like a super fun, like a broad algorithm question, but then more ML oriented question as well. So preparation on this side is, I would say, is also important. Like we are doing language model training, right? Or some things with everything with language models. Then this is the question that you are given. How you can approach this question first conceptually, then how you can write this question in terms of the coding and to solve it. I think this is the general idea.
Laura or Kate, do you have anything to add there?
Laura, do you want to go ahead?
I think I don't have much to add. Ahmed already summarized it very nicely.
Excellent. 10 out of 10, Ahmed. Out of the park. I guess what would be curious to get a sense of too is from one of the questions in the chat is, what is the timeline that candidates should expect when looking, in this case, specifically for summer internship opportunities, but perhaps a research hiring timeline in general? Kate, what's been your experience?
Usually, every company does it a little bit differently. We typically post about a semester ahead. So for summer internships, we start recruiting between the months of January and May at the latest. But everybody does it slightly differently.
Another thing I've been wondering in this conversation is research is a lot of trial and error, as far as I can tell. Like, you venture down some roads and there's no telling what will be there, perhaps a dead end. What's your perspective on sharing some of your failures in an application process, routes you've tried that didn't work out? Do you think this is advisable, or would you recommend candidates to just focus on the paths where they've encountered success? Amit, what's your stance on this one?
I think Kate has a better position to answer this, to be honest. But I believe, like, this is, I'm not sure this is really about industry versus academy, but in general for like applying to a team, because we've been touching upon this point, like connection, communicating. This is really, really important, two things. And I think comfortably explaining what's been failed and how did you solve this is really showcasing like how you communicate, right? And how you can connect with your team members for this particular experience. That's why my approach at this would be always comfortably saying, okay, that was the thing that I failed, but this was my approach, either succeed or not. I mean, it's less important.
Yeah, from my side, I think there's a couple of sticky points when you are trying to get hired at a position. And one is, of course, like, how do you structure a resume that stands out of thousands of others? But then the other aspect is, when that recruiter call is the first aspect of the conversation, is how do you make that conversation sticky enough to be memorable? And I think being vulnerable, self-aware, open, descriptive are all very important ways of standing out amongst other conversations. And when we were doing research scholar screens, it would be 60 to 100 phone calls. And one of the questions that we asked was, tell us about a mistake that you've made in the past. And having the ability to reflect on your previous learnings is incredibly important in a junior position, because you're not expected to know everything, but you are expected to know how to navigate a potential pitfall. Like, where do you look for answers, and how do you correct the situation when something inevitably goes unexpectedly?
Oh, that's great to hear. So it's not a trick question. You're not supposed to say, I've never made any mistakes ever in my life.
What is your greatest weakness? I work too hard.
Exactly. Are there other questions from that process, or ones that come up regularly, Kate? Can you give us more of this inside scoop?
Well, one of them was around, like, what do you want to work on next? And truthfully, like, my least favorite answer is anything and everything. Like, when people are like, I'll work on anything, I don't care. Like, I think it's okay to add that you have a lot of openness and a lot of general curiosities, but these questions are really meant to get to know you better. So having some clarity around your interests and passions is really high signal in a conversation.
Laura or Amit, do either of you remember answers you've given to these? Do you have stories of failure and how you navigated that are proven success rate on getting hired with?
Oh, like that last bit, of course I'm not sure, but I do like remember very distinctly one big, I guess, failure, which turned out fine in the end, is that I was coming from a background of econometrics when I was applying to internships. And so I was very nervous when I was doing coding interviews for the first time. And my first interview at Google was a guy opening the interview saying, like, so let's start with something really easy, just getting to know each other and warm up. And he said something like, if I now open google.com, what happens? And I was just like, ooh, he meant like with the router and all that stuff. And I was just like, ooh, I've really like, I can't tell you anything about this question. I have no idea. And I just said that, and he found it funny, and I guess we moved on. And I mean, I also tried to say some stuff, but I caveated with saying that I just really actually don't know. But interested to know, and that all turned out fine, and I still got that internship. So maybe that's an example of being upfront and, you know, relying on the other skills you have to bring to the table than this specific one.
What a great story. I could just imagine being in that position, and within moments of joining the call, you're like, well, there goes that one. But sounds like you kept your cool. Congrats, Laura.
Yeah, to add to that, by the way, I kept my cool because the interviewer was great about it. If they would have been like, oh, okay, and maybe not really responded, then I would be very nervous.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess that kind of branches in. Any tips for, like, let's be honest, interviews and applications are nerve-wracking affairs. Often they've been weeks or months of preparation, and there's this feeling of like, okay, I gotta do it. Any tips for keeping cool in these circumstances?
I think practice answering questions is extremely important. Like you have to, and again, I can only speak in detail to the stage of the interview that involves me as the recruiter, but having a really tailored about me section, like, because one of the main questions that you will likely get asked is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Sometimes even in the technical interviews, when the technical interviewer wants to get to know you better, like have a little nutshell bio about yourself, like down to a T, and practice with your friends, or like even with a non-technical aunt or something like that, and be like, does that make sense? Being able to describe your previous work to somebody who may come from a very different background is extremely valuable. But at the end of the day, practice truly makes perfect. And then maybe like getting a little bit of that nervous energy out before you get on the call. So like I will try to like go on a walk or listen to my favorite song before I get on a call to just like get rid of some of that nervousness. Madeline, I bet you have a really good tip, because you do so many wonderful like public speaking engagements, and you're always so poised and lovely. Like, is there anything that's helped you in your past?
I mean, admittedly, I get nervous even jumping on calls like this and talking to you all today. And the thing I keep in mind for all these things is just remembering that I'm talking to people. And I'm talking to people who typically share some of my interests and excitement, and that they want me to succeed. Like when you're being interviewed by someone, their hope is that you are the best candidate ever, and that it will be a very easy job for them, that they'll hop on the call with you and that you will be amazing, and that they'll be like, great, done, the interview process is over, we're hiring this person. They want you to be successful. And I think for me, keeping that in mind, like getting on the call today, remembering, oh, everyone on this call is wanting to learn something, wanting to engage with this topic. They're not coming on, you're not here critically being like, oh, I hope they say the right answers. No, we're here because we're wanting each other to succeed. And that's always helped me stay grounded again. Ahmed, how about you? You have some high pressure situations. How do you keep your cool?
In the context of in interview time, from the side of not interviewer but the applicant, I have two more tips, like just slight addition to what Kate already said. But one thing is preparation, but also like for the coding preparation, what I did, or I would suggest strongly, is really when you do coding, like a preparation, basically solving potential questions, right? Listing them, writing somewhere, keeping that list growing, gives you some sort of confidence if you do it properly. I think that's a good one. At least it was one of the reasons that I was relatively comfortable when I mean, of course, it's impossible to have that question, but this practice itself and written somewhere, and when you can just look at it time to time. It is really nice. Other thing also nice, because this is a research interview anyways, being up to date with the current literature, like new papers. I think this is a good kind of thing, because you are discussing something and you say, oh, yesterday there's this paper published, I read, and it talks about this thing. So that's yeah, okay, this applicant is really knows what's talking about. I think this is a nice kind of tip to give. In terms of the interviewer side, I totally believe what you said. Like, I think this is something that also all the interviewers are learning as they go. But as the applicant is comfortable, interview is also more comfortable, because everyone wants the same thing, right? That in that situation. So it is totally normal to be kind of excited and a little bit nervous. But talking is the best way in that moment. As you talk more, you make both sides also more comfortable, I think.
Yeah, that is good to remember. Whenever I've conducted interviews as the interviewer, I'm nervous too. I'm trying to represent my company. I want to make a good impression on this candidate. So remembering that both parties are nervous, and this tip of staying really up to date on the latest research, you might have an opportunity as an applicant to teach your interviewer something. Maybe they've missed this paper, maybe they're not aware of it yet. And I think if you can already add value to their life and their research portfolio, what a great impression to give. Okay, we've gone wildly off the list of questions we so carefully prepared. Thanks to everyone who's been adding things to the chat. We've still got about 10 minutes for some more questions. So if you have some more, we'll keep trying to integrate them in. But I wanted to get back to some of these ones that we'd been discussing. Laura, what kind of research experience do you think is most valuable when applying to roles in industry?
Yeah. So of course I'm coming at this from a perspective of an intern right now, but I can tell you what I am optimizing for in my PhD. And I think the most valuable thing to do, and like the optimal sort of North Star that I'm trying to reach for, is really come up with interesting research questions that I'm passionate about and try to find the intersection with what is currently going to be impactful both in industry and in academia, in just for the field of AI as a whole, and really try to become an expert in your little niche area. So ideally the goal is to just, add some new knowledge to that part of the field. And I think that will put you in a really good position. If the company you're applying for is also interested in those questions, then you are sort of the expert to talk about, and people know your name and like, okay, they have published on that, they can talk about these questions. And yeah, somewhat separately from that, and something that I've already talked about, I think sort of not necessarily the research experience itself, but really like this aspect of communicating it is also very important. So going to conferences as much as you can, really cold emailing people to talk about your own research. What some of like good advice from my own advisors that I've gotten and that people in my lab are always doing is don't wait for people to email you to give talks. Like you can email people saying like, I have this great talk, can I come to your lab or your company? And many people will be open to that, and then you meet some new people and present your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Little plug for the Cohere for AI community. Our leads are many of whom are on the call. Hello, leads, are hosting talks all the time, Ahmed included. And Anir, I see you too. Gusti, yeah, we've got all sorts of leads on the call. They're often hosting guest speakers, and if you reach out to us, we'll pass on your name, and it's a great way to also practice that communication element and distilling your research and being communicative about it. A great way to practice that there. Okay, we've had double ask in the chat for this question about tips or resources for ML interview prep. I think Akash has raised a really good point here in the chat that a challenging part turns out to be the engineering design of an ML system, especially as this can be tailored to the company's domain and may require some industrial level engineering experience. Any tips or resources for this? Ahmed, what's up?
I don't recall concrete resource at the moment. I'm sure there are some in internet, but one way to do it, I'm not sure this is really an answer, but in internship, I think for the later for the later application, when you have an internship in similar, I mean, doesn't need to be the same research question, right? But having an industry internship throughout your master, PhD, I think this is very valuable and also relatively easier to find because you have this time frame, let's say 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. Also, there are in companies are quite interested in hosting interns. I think that would be one particular suggestion. I'm not sure how concrete answer it is, but yeah, this is broad.
Anything to add, Laura?
I also don't know a specific one that really tests engineering design of an ML system, but some of the ways me and my friends have been approaching that is really, for example, coding up a transformer from scratch, implementing backprop in NumPy, those kind of things. And then I guess like a little bit more sort of an internship is of course like probably the best way to really get hands-on experience, but you could like start a small project there and like a really small project, take one from Kaggle or something like that, and try to implement something there. Yeah, and I mean, cracking the coding interview is one that I've already mentioned, which is not tailored to ML, but that's just I think one that always needs to be, the contents of which always needs to be in your mind when you apply to places.
Great. It's also great to see, yeah, lots of people are putting resources in the chat. Keep them coming. And if someone wants to copy all these and share them in our Roads to Research channel and Discord, that would be great. We can distill this chat and keep it going and share more resources there. Amit, what did you want to add?
Yeah, when Laura was talking, that's why there was small sound, because I was trying to find this Andrei Karpathy's YouTube videos about like implementing nano GPT and stuff. I think these are really a great series. So that would be one idea like to look at, for example. So I will post here. There are multiple of them, and it's really helpful if you want to like zero in from transformer, implement something.
Brilliant. Laura, did you have another one?
Yes, actually, then Ahmed in turn inspired me again to think of one that's really amazing and really tough. But Sasha Rush has tensor puzzles on GitHub, and I haven't gone through them yet, but some of my friends swear by them. They're apparently really good to make you think about machine learning implementations in detail and like in very smart and efficient ways. And yeah, definitely go through them. I'll post them in the chat as well.
Brilliant. Okay, what a wealth of resources. Who's capturing all this? Let me know in the chat if you are the person who is copying this all down and going to be the hero and post it on Discord so it's not lost in the ethers. Just say it's me or something in the chat, and then we know it's covered and we can all, the rest of us can rest easy. Would love someone to volunteer to just share this back to us. Yes. Kamathi, thank you. Okay, great. Kamathi's our new note taker. We'll look forward to your post and your share. Thank you. This will be a resource for the ages, and we can keep adding to it offline. Okay, Kate, tell us, what are the common mistakes or pitfalls that researchers fall into when applying for roles, and how can we learn from the mistakes of those who have come before us and not fall in those same holes?
Okay, I'll be very direct and honest, but it's not meant to be a roast of anybody. So if like anyone has done this before, just know these are the most common, which is why I'm talking about them. But we had a question in the chat: should a resume be one page? And I think that's something that a lot of people have heard. So I see a lot of resumes that are one page, but are size 6 font, have no page margins. So if the choice is between a size 6 font or a 2-page resume, you should pick a 2-page resume. And I went back because I wanted to really speak from a place of like, of data. And I looked at hired resumes, and half of them were over 1 page. So don't let people gaslight you into thinking that you absolutely have to cram everything into a 1-page resume. At the same time, it's like, again, under editing rather than over editing. You don't want to lose your spark in adding too much information. Like I've had somebody who prepared a slide deck that kind of accompanied their resume, and it was very thoughtful, and they've clearly put in a ton of thoughts and effort into it. If Madeline, over under, how many slides do you think were on that deck?
I'm gonna go 7.
132.
No.
So again, it's like it crushes my heart. It breaks it into pieces that someone invested so much time into this, like, really wonderful work, but it's just unfortunately not feasible for somebody to be able to review all of that, especially with the attention that you obviously put into writing all of it. Things like broken links and stuff, it doesn't serve you. So just maybe double check when you're sharing a LinkedIn page. Like what I get a lot, it's shocking, is sharing somebody else's LinkedIn profile. Like when we have the LinkedIn page, it's like a whole other person that's not the candidate. And then also some faux pas in conversation. I absolutely recommend reaching out to recruiters when there's a position posted. You should apply for the role before you message the recruiter. When you message the recruiter and say like, hey, I'm really interested in this role. Here's my resume. And I say, oh, great, I'm going to flag your resume to the hiring manager. Oh, I can't find your name in the system. And they're like, oh, I didn't apply. It's just something that's creating a more streamlined experience. Also, it's tough, but being cautious of asking for coffee chats of the recruiter when the role is actively posting and being recruited for may be difficult to have an additional chat to all of the screens happening. And then messages like, this is like my least favorite one ever. When people message me, never met them in my life, we just connected, and they say, how have you been? Like, it's like, where do we start? Do we start from my birth year? Like, how have I been since when? So the rule of thumb, just message, quick 3 sentences, introducing yourself, why you're interested in this role. Include something other than your resume, because resumes tend to not be that interesting. So a link to an open source project, GitHub, or a website. And then the last one that I was going to share is absolutely just do your best to not get discouraged by all of these processes. Like it really is one of the many unprecedented times that we've been living through where it's so competitive. Like a rejection is by no means an indication of your intelligence or your potential or future outcomes. So all you can do is just keep iterating on your pitch, on your resume, on your experience. Lean on the ML community. You're already doing the right thing, connecting with other people, and then just doing your best to stay resilient and pushing forward.
Hey, we need to get you on a TED Talk or something. You're giving us the truth here. This is brilliant. Thank you. Okay, we're coming up into our last minute. So a question for all our panelists in 30 seconds or less. What advice would you like to share with people who are considering applying to industry roles? Who's ready to jump in first with their 30-second of advice?
I would just say talk to as many people as possible. Like lean on every like 6 degree of connections that you have. If somebody works at if somebody works at Cohere and you went to the same school or you have the same friend, like try to lean on them, try to attend things like Cohere Build Day and so on, like really get immersed in the world around you.
Brilliant. Ahmed or Laura, go for it.
30-second answer would be, I mean, I said like a skill set requires a bit all-arounder, but also try to be stand out in terms of one publication, but more impactful, or one project that becomes like a viral, doesn't need to be viral, but having something that's visible, I think that would be a suggestion. Also make you stand out.
Magnificent. And Laura, what's yours?
I think also connecting some of the stuff that Kate has been saying about that it's good to come across authentic. I think it's also really important to find something that you're passionate about, as opposed to, you know, trying to go with what is out there and what people are interested in. So that would be one thing for me that I would advise. Like, of course, make sure that it's also actually interesting to some other people, but definitely try to find something you're passionate about. Yeah.
Excellent advice all around. Laura, Kate, Amit, thank you. Wow, what a quick hour. Thank you so much for diving into this, sharing your expertise, insight. Great questions in the chat. If we didn't get to your question, share them on Discord and we'll try to tag in our panelists, and others can chime in too with their experience. I've just shared some links in the chat once again. So this forum is available if you want to track your attendance and share that you are here and key takeaways. But otherwise, look forward to future sessions. We'll have one coming up soon on applying to roles in academia. So a nice counterpoint to this one. I'm looking forward to sharing some stories from the road, both successes and failures, but also let me know what you'd like to hear from these sessions, and we'll try to get to that as well. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your week. We'll see you at some other talks.